Going live. Hi everyone, welcome to another Big Questions Soma live stream. It's another week in the quarantine. From what I hear from you guys, it sounds like you're doing well, that you're hanging in there, and that you're moving right along. You know, this week I've really been learning to kind of appreciate the small things. When things are normal, we have less free time, so when we do get free time, we usually pick things at the top of our list to do, like going to Disneyland or going to a big birthday party, just bigger kind of things like that. But now we have a lot more free time and a lot less to do. So I've seen examples this week of how creative people are getting in the ways that have been using their free time. As the world has very much slowed down, I think many people will realize that some of those small and simple things they can do together as a family are just as valuable as some of the bigger things that they would normally use their free time for. Like just this last week, I saw a dad and his son just out in the park hitting golf balls together. Families are out on walks all together, walking their dogs more often. Elise and I are playing hide and seek with Bolt in the house. We just rearrange all the furniture and we make like blanket forts and things, and he comes and finds us, and we're playing QSDT here as a youth group, and that's something totally fun and crazy and creative and totally different we wouldn't normally do otherwise. Now, I'm not discounting the seriousness of what we're going through and that many people are struggling, but as with every situation we can go through, God has something he can show us. And I really think that God is trying to tell us something here. Our culture is so fast-paced, and now we've been forced to slow down. There are many things that we've lost, but I think there's some very valuable perspective that we can gain as well. Usually we're so overstimulated, so busy, our schedules are so booked up, that I think sometimes we forget to look at the little things and remember that the really simple things in life are really important too. So that's just a little something to think about as you sit there in quarantine with your thoughts. Let's jump into this week's big question. Now, many of you know that before I started leading SOMA, I worked as a wildlife biologist. And my major in school was biology with a concentration in ecology. And during that time when I was in college, I had a good friend who I grew up with who asked me about this. This friend grew up with me in the church, but after high school, he kind of went his own way. So he knew I was a Christian, and he also knew I was majoring in a science. And one day I had this conversation with him where he asked me about this. And I remember this so clearly for some reason. We were sitting in the library in the computer lab at Cal State Fullerton, and he asked me about how I could have faith and also major in a science, especially ecology, which is a science that is very grounded in evolutionary theory. And my answer to that question was, well, easily. And in fact, I said that studying science only helped my faith to increase. And he said, wow, I just don't understand how that is. And so my response to him, and my response to something like that, is something I've talked to you guys many times, something I've talked to you guys about many times at SOMA. And it's called the analogy of the watchmaker. So we'll just talk about that real quick. Watches used to be assembled by hand with care by watchmakers, who knew how to put all the tiny intricate pieces together in such a way that the watch will work. If you were examining one of those watches, you would never doubt that it had a creator, that it had a designer, that somebody put it together. Our planet and the life on it is vastly more complex than a watch. So I have no doubt that there is a creator, and that creator is God. Many people feel that faith and science are two opposing ideas, that they're mutually exclusive. Like they say you can be a man of science or you can be a man of God, but you can't be both. Science is all about facts and proof and things that are real and tangible, and faith is all about belief and spirituality and things that are invisible. And so that's an understandable dilemma right there. After all, the very definition of the word faith is belief in something that cannot be seen, something that cannot be observed with your eyes or your senses. And science is all about explaining what is observable. Scientific method, right? You observe something in nature, you come up with a hypothesis to explain it, and then you test your hypothesis. Faith, on the other hand, puts belief in things that are impossible to observe with your senses. But when you look around the world, what do you see? You see complexity, you see beauty, you see creativity, you see variety, and you see a world that is well designed. And the more that I studied sciences, and as a bio major, you study all kinds of different sciences, math, physics, chemistry, all of the subfields of biology. The more I studied these things, the more I realized the world and everything in it is incredibly well designed. I was making these observations, and in the very same way that science tells us to, I had to come up with a way to explain these observations. And the best explanation I could come up with is that they have a creator. The method I used to determine this was not so different from a scientific method. I looked for evidence to support my hypothesis that God created our universe, and I just kept finding more and more evidence. Tonight's big question was submitted by Jonathan, so if you're out there, thanks, Johnny, for a great question. And the question is, how does faith tie into science? And my answer is, it ties in perfectly. Despite what is a common opinion, faith and science actually fit perfectly hand in hand. I've been saying this a lot recently, and I've been saying it in this way for a particular reason, and it is reasonable to believe that God exists. Part of the reason that I say this, that it's reasonable to believe that God exists, and part of the reason I say it that way, is because any argument kind of has to start there, right? If you can't at least provide reasonable arguments that God exists, then you can't really go anywhere from there with your arguments. Now, there are a ton of arguments for why it is reasonable to believe that God exists. We talked about a few during our Big Questions message on that topic. One of those arguments was the analogy of the watchmaker, which we talked about just a few moments ago, and we'll talk about a few more tonight. But if you can accept that belief in God is reasonable, then you can also believe that it is reasonable to assume that he created everything. And if God created everything, then he also created all of the things that the different fields of science try to explain. So, faith ties into science because science is simply the practice of trying to discover and to explain the natural world that God created. Sadly, many people see science as a way to try to disprove God or to discredit religion in general. It's likely that people who do this have already set out on a mission to do so and are thus unable to recognize God in nature and science even when his fingerprints are so clearly visible upon it. If you don't believe in God, then you have to come up with another explanation for how everything got here in the first place. I'm not talking about just the creation of the world. I'm talking about everything. How does the universe, how does matter come into existence if God doesn't exist? And you have to explain that, and without the presence of God creating it. And one such prevalent explanation is that you can just assume that everything was already here, and then the Big Bang happens, and forces of evolution act upon it, and so on and so forth. But this is a huge assumption. How could everything just already be here? That's not a good enough explanation for me. There is no analog for something like this that we see anywhere in all of observable nature. Nothing that we have ever understood or learned about our reality has led us to the conclusion that it is possible that something could come from nothing. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no logical scientific way to explain this, so the existence of anything must have come about through supernatural means, through a God that existed for eternity, with no beginning and with no end. Now, it's much easier, I think, for us to understand eternity when we think about the future, something having no end. Yeah, we can kind of get the idea. But for something to have no beginning, the idea that God has always existed, that he existed before the creation of the world, yeah, that one's harder. That one's pretty impossible to understand. So when you think in these terms, the only explanation for how the universe came to be has to be supernatural, something beyond us. And when you follow the logic, you can see God's fingerprints even before the beginning of anything. But let's go a little further forward than that. Now, one of the ways I would also answer the big question, how does faith tie into science, would be it does so in many great ways. Every way possible, in fact, because faith and science are not so different when you realize that God created the entire observable universe. That being said, we can only talk about so many of these things during one message. So if I miss something that you wanted to talk about, ask me, and we'll spend some time on it. But let's go a little further forward, and let's talk about an idea called rare earth. And it's the idea that there are many different conditions that are necessary for life to exist on a planet in our universe. For all of these conditions to have been met simultaneously is extremely unlikely. Yet this is what has happened on Earth. The question is, was it an accident or was it on purpose? Let's look at just 3 of these conditions. First, the Earth's distance from the sun. If the Earth were closer to the sun, the Earth's surface would be drastically higher in temperature. Glaciers would melt, creating a large global ocean, causing the sea levels to rise, probably flooding many of our settlements. With more water on the planet to absorb heat, evaporation increases, causing much of the dissolved carbon dioxide in the ocean to enter into the atmosphere. These conditions are much less suitable for life to survive and flourish. What if the Earth were further from the sun? Well, many of the opposite effects would take place. More of the planet would be covered in ice, increasing the Earth's reflectivity, leading to a drastic cooling effect on the Earth's surface. Less evaporation also changes the chemistry of the atmosphere, resulting in, again, conditions that are much less suitable for life. But we know that, of course, the Earth is in the perfect position. Not too far from the sun, not too close to the sun. Is that an accident, or is that on purpose? I know what I think. Next, how about the chemistry of our atmosphere? The atmosphere is comprised of 4 main gases: nitrogen gas at 78%, oxygen gas at 21%, argon at less than 1%, and carbon dioxide at 0.03%. Now, argon is an inert gas, which means that it doesn't form chemical reactions. So the presence of argon in the atmosphere is basically inconsequential. Nitrogen gas is the most abundant gas in our atmosphere. It's not inert, but does have a very low reactivity. And this is a good thing, because if nitrogen was reactive, it would combine with oxygen, resulting in an ocean full of nitric acid. Not something that we want. Oxygen is the most common reactive gas in the atmosphere. Of course, we know oxygen is essential for organic life, and oxygen is very abundant here on Earth. Oxygen, in other than trace amounts, has not been discovered in the atmosphere of any other planet. Carbon dioxide is also an essential gas within our atmosphere because plants require it for photosynthesis. The very small concentration in which carbon dioxide exists in our atmosphere is actually ideal, because even a small increase in the amount of carbon dioxide would accelerate the chemical weathering of the continents, causing more and more bicarbonate to form in the oceans, leading to chemical conditions in the water that cannot support life. But the concentration of gases in our atmosphere is perfectly balanced. And thirdly, the Earth is covered in a gigantic reserve of liquid water, the oceans. Water is an extremely rare compound in space. There is no other known planet where water is present in amounts even comparable to that of the Earth. And water is absolutely essential for life. All of its chemical and physical properties make it so. Not only do we have a permanent supply of liquid water, we also don't have too much of it. We also don't have so much of it that it covers the Earth's land masses, making terrestrial life impossible. Now, these are just 3 examples of how well the Earth is designed within our universe to support life. In reality, there are dozens of examples within physics, astronomy, chemistry, biology, math, and so many other sciences, all of which point to the complex design of our universe. A design which implies a designer. Now, there's a common argument out there that attempts to refute this rare Earth idea that I'm talking about. And someone might say, well, the reason that life exists is because the Earth was the one planet that met all of those necessary conditions for life. It wasn't designed that way, it just met the conditions. So life started. All right, well, first of all, biology has been unable to explain how the first living organism came into existence, even when the conditions were right for it. Biology has not been able to figure out how life started to begin with, so that's its own issue. But if the Earth and the universe wasn't designed to meet the conditions to make life possible, then it had to happen by chance. What do you think the chance is that all of those hundreds, probably thousands, who knows how many, probably very many more, what are the chances that all of those things happened by accident at the same time on Earth? Well, they did the math. A mathematician named Roger Penrose has calculated, based on only one of the hundreds of conditions present in the physical universe, that the probability of the emergence of a life-giving universe was 1 divided by 10 raised to the power 10 and again raised to the power of 123. This number represents a probability that is much smaller than that of winning the lottery jackpot for more days than the universe has been in existence. So where does that leave us? Are you going to put your faith in God, or are you going to try to win the lottery for more days in a row than you have left in your life? I know what I would do. So there's so many things we could talk about when it comes to faith and science. So many examples. There's a lot that I wanted to talk about tonight that I'm not going to, just because this message is already getting too long. So again, if there's something specific you wanted to hear about, just ask me and we can talk. But that's going to do it for tonight's message. I'll leave you with this. If you are at least open to the possibility of the existence of a creator, you will see that the more that science reveals about our universe, the more it points towards intelligent design. And this designer, set all of these things in motion because he loved you. And he demonstrated and proved that love upon the cross. There is only one conclusion that the total sum of human knowledge points to that can satisfy our souls. Psalm 139:14. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Let's pray. Dear Father God, what an incredible universe you have designed. There's so many mysteries, God. Even those who haven't put their faith in you admit that there are mysteries within the universe that we still don't know about, that we have an incomplete understanding of how it all works. And God, your design is complex and infinite and perfect, and it all points to you. God, I pray that we would just see that every single day as we look around. We would see how just the variety, the beauty, the complexity of what you have made all points to just the amazing God that you are. God, you could have just made all of this amazing world and given us so much to experience and left it at that, but we know you didn't. God, we know that you sent your son, and that is probably more amazing than anything that this world has to offer. God, I pray that we wouldn't take that for granted. I pray that we would see your glory in even the simple things that we experience on a day-to-day basis, knowing that it's all part of your plan. That, God, in the end, the most important thing is you, and that we have hope for a future glory with you where we'll get to experience so much more beyond this earth. I want to lift up each of our students. God, as we've been in this for about a month and a half now, pray that you would just continue to be with them, strengthen them, help them to adapt to the new normal. Watch over them, and I pray that we'll be able to get back together very soon. We love you. Thank you for sustaining us. Thank you for watching over us, for being who you are. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. It is time for quarantine special delivery trivia. Here we go. So go ahead and give me a shout out in the comments if you guys haven't, so I know who's here, and we're going to get started. So remember, if you won last week, you are not eligible to win until nobody else has gotten the question right? So if nobody else gets the question correct, I'll say, all right, last week's winners can jump in, and if you get it, then if you get the answer right, then you can win twice in a row. Now, here's what we're going to do as well, because, hold on a second, let's get my face out of the way. Get out of the way, face. Yeah. All right, here's what we're going to do, since, we don't want to make things too easy for you guys. If you've already won, and you win again, like I said, I'm going to make it more difficult for you. And part of what that higher level difficulty is going to entail is two things. One, you cannot use any type of automated camera, okay? So Ring is off limits because that's just no effort right there. Okay, so no ring is allowed. And then you also have to actually physically be holding the camera that captures me delivering to your house. Okay, so for example, you can't get your parents or your siblings to do your dirty work for you. Okay, you gotta do it yourself. All right, so that's what it's gonna be like. Most of you guys have already won once before, so I think the difficulty level is gonna go up overall for everybody. Okay. All right. I had an awesome time yesterday. Not yesterday, Monday, when we did QSDT. Joseph captured me. By the way, Joseph, you live far from church, man. It's crazy. It's a long drive. But Joseph captured me on camera, so he won a gift card. For the first time since we started this, I managed to defeat Drew and Nate. That was awesome. Also snuck up to Sarah's house, army crawled up to her front door, dropped off the package, didn't catch me on camera. Good stuff. So I'm excited for when we all come back because I'm going to compile that footage together and we'll all be able to watch it together. So that'll be fun. So anyway, I'm excited for another round. So let's get to it. All right, guys, get your typing fingers ready. We are going to start with the first question from last week's stream. Here we go. Question number 1, QSCT. According to a theory we discussed from C.S. Lewis, what is God over and above, able to suspend and manipulate, and able to move freely throughout? That's correct. Nate, time. Good job. So time, or I would also have taken past, present, future. So, Nate is the winner. Okay, so post in chat the snacks that you want. We have 1 Pringles left, so Nate, you can grab that one since you're the first winner. We got a bunch of Slim Jims, a bunch of Sour Patch. We still have Junior Mints, and we have all this aforementioned sodas. So we're running a little low, but that's okay because there's still a lot of good stuff out there. By the way, Joseph, remember, since you won last week, I'm going to have to ask you to wait until everyone else who didn't win last week has a chance to answer the questions before you answer. All right, cool. All right, next question. We do not have Sour Punch, Nate. I'm sorry. We do have Sour Patch, though. All right, next question coming up. All right, no hints about what's about to happen, but let me just say, get ready to type quick. Here it comes. True or false? Knowing whether you really have free will should affect your choices. Who's going to be the first to get the 50-50 correct? Knowing whether you really have free will should affect your choices. True or false? I'm not going to say anything other than that. Usually I would say you only get one guess. Or actually, usually I would say that you get as many guesses as you want, but on this one you only get one guess because there's only 2 possible answers. All right, Olivia, you win. The answer is false. You guys should have seen I wasn't responding to Noah there and realized the answer was false. No, knowing whether you really have free will should not affect your choices. So that statement there is false. Okay? So we talked about how free will is just kind of an intangible concept, and knowing whether it is a fact that free will actually exists doesn't really change what you do. Okay? Because we talked about human responsibility. Yeah, good strategy. Yeah, all right. But I hope at least you understand, the concept behind the question, because that's kind of the idea. All right, we got one left here. One left. Here it comes. So let's do it. Next question. We talked about how God has already determined who are the elect, which are those who will receive salvation. What is this doctrine called? And I'll give you a hint. It starts with a P. We talked about how God has already determined who are the elect, which are those who will receive salvation. What is this doctrine called? It starts with a P. If you guys don't get it, no, that is extremely close. I'm
Oh
almost,
my gosh.
I'm almost, I'm almost leaning towards just. Oh, okay. I'm gonna give this one to Ashlyn because it is predestination. That is what it's called. It's not predestiny is so close, and if nobody else got it, I was probably gonna give that one to Noah, but Ashlyn, you were correct there with predestination. So very nice. So we got 3 winners this week. We have Nate, Olivia, and Ashlyn. Now, 2 of you guys have won gift cards. Olivia has won QSDT to 4, but she didn't win a gift card. So her Jacob's sneakiness level is still at 1. Okay, but for for Nate and Trisha, Ashlyn. I'm just reading your name there. For Nate and Ashlyn, the difficulty level is at level 2. Level 2 Jacob's sneakiness. Okay, so I'll give you guys a text next week when those are going to be coming when those snacks are going to be coming your way. So again, post Nate, Ashlyn, and Olivia, post in the chat before we close out here what 5 snacks you want. Okay? Cool. All right. Next, we are going to vote on next week's big question. We only have 2 questions left in our big question series, unless you have another big question that we could spend a whole night talking about. Okay? So go ahead and in the chat, post the number of the big question that you want to hear about next week. And if you have any other big questions, go ahead and post those too. By the way, if you come up with a big question and, it's not necessarily like something you thought of right now, you can still just text me later and I'll add that to the list too, okay? But for now, if you have one right now, post it in the chat. If not, text me. But either way, vote for next week's big question. All right, we got 4 votes for 2. Any other votes coming in? 4 votes for 2. Okay. Got another one. Okay, it's going to be 2. All right, so next week's big question is, how could a loving God send people to hell? That is quite a big question. So we'll be tackling that next week. Good stuff. All right. So we are going to jump into our weekly Zoom meeting. Michael's going to go ahead and Michael sent me a link, so I'm going to post that for you guys in the chat. Hopefully Michael will also has the room code and password on hand. There we go. So we're going to post the link, and we're also going to post the info. I'm also going to put that on Remind once we get everything started. Here it comes. So join us for Zoom. We have an extra special game planned for you guys tonight. An extra special game planned for tonight. So I hope you guys will join us. It is not Jackbox or Kahoot. It's something different, something special. So I hope that you guys will jump in to the Zoom meeting and hang out with us for the rest of the night. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thanks for joining me tonight, guys. As always, I'm looking forward to getting back together with you. Let me know if there's anything I can be praying for you guys, and I look forward to seeing you and hearing from you next week. All right, guys. Until next time. See you on Zoom.